Give us a sense of what you found. It was 18 to 29-year-olds, I understand, that you polled. What did you find out?
We found out a lot of good news and some bad news. The good news is that we do think this is going to be the year, the midterm year, when we see a record-breaking event with 18 to 29-year-olds. To give you some perspective, young people haven't voted at more than 21% for a couple generations, since 1986. So it's not just a millennial problem in terms of youth voting. It's been a millennial problem, a Gen X problem, a baby boomer problem. Between 18 and 20% of this generation typically voted, and I think it's going to change this year. That's the good news. The bad news is what's driving them to the polls is more fear than hope about the future of America and a bunch of trauma that they have have had to burden themselves with, whether it's coming out of the Great Recession or whether it's the regular examples of school shootings and other kinds of violent activities across the U.S.
You see that 65% fearful as opposed to hopeful, which is really disturbing. But at the same time, from your experience in polling, what kind of drop-off is there between people saying, I definitely am going to vote, and they're actually going to the polls and voting?
There's certainly a drop-off. The good news from our perspective is the drop-off is typically consistent, between 8 to 10 points. On average, it's been, I think, 7.5 to 8.5 points over the last several cycles. So to give you some perspective, back in 2010, the wave election that brought the Tea Party to power, 27% in our survey indicated that they would vote, and 20% voted. In 2014, 26% said they'd vote, and 16% voted. Today, in this poll, 40% saying they're going to vote. So even if you discount this by 10, even 15 points, which would be outside of the range, we're still at a 50% higher number than we saw back 4 years ago.
And given those high dissatisfaction numbers, does that tell us anything about which way they're likely to vote, the majority of them?
Well, Democrats are more enthusiastic than Republicans, but Republicans are quickly catching up. Republicans are 7 points more likely to participate in this election than they were 6 months ago. The poll was conducted on the back end of the Kavanaugh hearings, and I think as young people consider the election, they're more likely to vote one. The second thing, though, is that by a margin of 2 to 1, they prefer Democrats' control of Congress, 66 to 32%. That margin has shrunk a little bit since, shrunk by 7 points since the spring, but Democrats, compared to Republicans, are strongly preferred.
Now, one of the things you just mentioned to me I hadn't focused on was asking them about the kind of economic system they prefer. Because we have the president's warning us about socialism. They're all trying to turn you into socialists. So how do they feel about socialism?
Well,
Bernie Sanders, by the way, says he is a socialist.
I'd say they're a la carte socialists. Okay, let me tell you why I say that. Because majority reject actually traditional capitalism and traditional socialism, specifically capitalism the way in which is being practiced today in their minds. They more approve of the concept, but again, the way in which it's practiced, they disapprove of. But then we asked, students and I asked about several different agenda items that would be normally aligned with a democratic socialist movement. And we saw strong majorities. In fact, over 60% of likely voters support single-payer health care, support free college, a la Bernie Sanders, for folks who come from families who make less than $125,000 a year. And a surpriser for us, the first time we asked it, federal guaranteed work with a minimum wage of $15 with benefits. Over 60%, including 30%, I think, of Trump voters and Republicans agree.
So finally, dramatic numbers uptick compared to other midterm elections among the young people. But what about the older demographics? Because maybe they've moved up similarly in the percentage that say that they're going to turn out and vote.
That's an excellent point. They will certainly move up. I think that young people, there's more room for young people to move up. So what we need to look at is the share of vote. 15% typically for the 18 to 29-year-old demographic in a presidential year, about 10% in a midterm year. For every 3 points, the youth vote increases its share. That accounts for about a good 1% in the overall Democratic margin if you look at a generic ballot. So I do think they're creeping up to 15%. This looks to us a lot more like a presidential year than a midterm year.